Myself, Ward 4, Councilor Libby Hernandez, and I know she's here. I'll entertain a motion on item 1, 2, and 3.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, I make a motion that the City Council Public Safety Committee with City Councilors present go into executive session for the purpose of discussing sensitive security measures here in City Hall, which would be items 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
We will be coming back out of the executive session. If we take any action in executive session, we will announce that later this evening, and we will then proceed with the regular agenda, starting with item number 4.
A second. All those in favor?
Roll call, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councilor McGivern?
Yes.
Councilor Murphy, yes. Okay, we will be going into executive session. We'll be back potentially in 15 minutes to a half hour. Later date. I'll entertain a motion to open item 4 for discussion.
Motion made second to take up item 4 for discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, introduced by Councilor Hernandez and Councilor Tallman. Property owners for 287 and 291 Elm Street, Carrie and Arthur Naatz, have reached out to possibly collaborate with City, Holyoke Police, and other landlords such as Tony Visone that owns 294, 298 Elm Street, and the buildings on Walnut Street adjacent to 300 Walnut Street, in the pursuit of installation of surveillance in an attempt to combat the overall criminal activity, drug, human trafficking in these areas. I have full contact information for both of them. Would like to set up a meeting amongst all departments, including the Honorable Mayor's Office, to initiate a plan to carry out our goal. We've had several meetings on this. We've made progress, and really what I'm trying to find out, Chief, is it appears we're not having quite as much activity, and I'm hoping that's the case. But Councilor Hernandez, would you like to offer any thought before I go to the Chief?
No, I mean, I just want to make sure that there was an option of them being able to tap into this grant through the One Holyoke development and through the Office of Community Development, but I'm not sure if they have this information, the landlords, and that they know that this is available for them. So that would be the only other thing to do, to try to connect them with these agencies and see how we can further, the relationship and further the resources for them so they can expand their progress.
Okay. Chief, if you can, just give us an update in terms, I know we put some portable cameras in there, I believe, on Hampshire Street part, and I believe at our last meeting we were having some progress in terms of stopping people from going into some of these buildings. So if you can update us.
Yes, we've been working hand in hand with these landlords. We have a great working relationship with them. My understanding of where we're at was just what you're talking about, the monetary holdups of some of the other security cameras and items that they wanted, looking into those different options, the grants and stuff like that. But irregardless of that, we are working hand in hand with them. I'm very confident that they're seeing results that they like. I think that they are going to see more results in the very near future that they're going to be very happy with. We sort of have a really good plan going forward for that area. And I know they're also purchasing another one of the buildings and rehabbing it. So we're very always enthusiastic to work with landlords who want to work with us and work collaboratively to deal with this kind of thing, because we want to help them. Yep. They're doing the right thing. They're doing all the right things. And we want to make sure that we do what we need to do to help them, to get that area drug-free.
Yep.
As much as possible.
Yeah. Thanks, Chief. I know the landlords at 287 and 291, I know when we first met, there were serious concerns about the safety of their tenants. So I'm just as an update, have we found that their tenants are in a much safer situation now and not having people coming into their building and threatening them?
What I would say is there's always challenges, and but we are constantly over there, not just our narcotics officers that are working directly with them, but our extra resources from our resource center down on, trying to get people, some of the people obviously that are in that area are there because they're dependent on drugs, and so we want to get those people help and get them on the road to recovery and get them out of that area that way. So we have constant checks going in and out of the hallways over there and trying to not just arrest our way out of that problem, but to help the people that we can help and then deal with the criminal element through the criminal justice system.
So just in terms of the ones that we're trying to help, I'm assuming that's the opioid task force that's meeting with,
Correct.
trying to meet with those people potentially as they
Yes,
are.
all the officers down there, yes.
Okay. Councilor Tallman?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Chief, was there any been progress? It talked about surveillance cameras being purchased by possibly the owners of these buildings, and if that has been done at all?
I know that they did install some cameras. There was more cameras they were looking to put up, but those came with the added costs of servers and the added expenses from the G&E, and those is where they were looking, maybe the city, to the bill. I certainly don't have it to put forward. It's something that, possibly could come from the money that's coming in. There was some requests for street cameras. I don't know where that's at, but, we certainly, we are in favor of any cameras that can go up anywhere, because cameras are the best crime fighting tool we have these days.
Yeah, the only thing I said, I know the last one, it seems like this has been going on, when was the date? Started 12/9. The last time we talked about it was in May, that I think the G&E was going to try to work with them to try to make a cost, help with the cost of putting the cameras up, because I think that is definitely a deterrent, and would you have that hooked up, to the police department, for the residents, for the safety of the ones that live in the buildings, and also for people that are on the street, that we could try to get there quicker if there's some kind of activity that's going on that's not good. So
I agree 100%.
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, and what I wanted to add was that did we ever invite, I know that we spoke about reaching out to the Holyoke Gas and Electric to see if they can make it cost efficient or if they were able to install so the police department can tap in. But did we ever invite them over to be part of the conversation, Mr. Chairman?
I have not invited them specifically on this order.
Okay.
I will say, though, that, they try. I know there was an incident on High in Hampshire as well, and on Sargent and Maple. And what they did is they kind of worked with those people. They could not pick up the expense of the cameras, but what they were doing is they were trying to provide a reduction in electrical cost or whatever the case might have been.
Right, like the fiber or
Yeah,
something?
I'm not exactly sure the technology of it, but I
Right.
know they were trying to, I know if we touch base with Jimmy Lavelle, he would, or if you can ask either one of those landlords to touch base with Mr. Lavelle, they may be able to do it cooperatively, because they're right across the street from each other, and have maybe cameras both in the alleys and cameras on Hampshire and on Sargent Street.
Right. I think that the key component is that we have to kind of like get all the moving parts, so we can, have them communicate, because I think if we can tap into the grants and then have also the gas and electric and that big collaboration, and then that'll be a good resource for the landlords. And with the continued effort with the police department, I mean, I have to say that going through the streets every day, because I live in that area, I've seen a big improvement in at least the hangout, and the visibility is cleared out tremendously. And mostly, I can't confirm like how people feel inside of the buildings, but at least on the outside, there's less. I mean, there's people out there because it's users, but there's less of the commotion and the visibility of the trafficking, like, in broad daylight. So something great is happening, and I think that if we push for this collaboration between the gas and electric and the grants, that we can further secure that area.
You have not heard from the tenants, though, have you? I know they had some concerns, and some of the tenants seemed to, at our last meeting, I thought the landlords indicated that tenants were not being harassed like they were.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because they did put a really good lighting over there, and I think with the increase of HPD
Yeah.
and everything else, the small, the cameras that they have installed has helped. But I think that if we can increase the amount of cameras and have all these agencies collaborate, that it will be a much better outcome.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Jeffrey, anybody trying to talk to me up there on Zoom? No? Okay. Would you like us to table this, or would you like that it's been complied with, and then if something else comes, start with a new order, if we have other issues, or we could table it and take it up again in a couple of months and see if we've made progress with the other cameras?
Probably table it because I don't want to, it's
Okay.
not comply with completely. So do you think that it would be prudent to invite the gas and electric over, or can we just reach out to them in our efforts?
Yeah, I've got myself a note to try to reach out to them tomorrow as well.
Oh, okay.
But it never hurts to have them in. I just, what I really was hoping today, so the information's been good. It's been a lot more positive than what we got that first one. So I'd be pretty confident that if it was still as bad, that those landlords would be here as well. So I could reach out and talk to them about getting in touch with the two property owners too, and see if they can work something out. So Chief, I'll have them include you in the conversation if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So,
Make a motion to table item number 4.
okay, motion is made and seconded to table item 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, table. Entertain a motion to take up item 5.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, order introduced by Councilor Lisi, Anderson Burgos, Hernandez, and LeBron Martinez, that in an effort to obtain neutral fact-based data and statistics, the city contract an independent assessment of Holyoke Police Department structures, policies, and practices. And I'm pretty sure I've invited Professor Hendricks, and I'm pretty sure she's here. Okay. Professor Hendricks, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'll start off with any of the makers of the order. Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. So I think this is the second conversation that we're having on the order. When we talked about this last, we had Chief Visone here. And I think that some of the really important things that came out of that conversation was, I think there was a recognition that the police department could be doing some more to do like monthly reports or an annual report at least that talks about some of the programs and things that the department is doing, because at least in Chief Visone's eyes, the police department was working on a lot of different programming that he assumed that the community would be very proud of. The other thing that came out of the conversation was there's probably multiple tiers of involvement that we could do in terms of this independent assessment. And as we go up in terms of tier and professionalism, that's also going to cost more and more money. And I think that Professor Hendricks is here to sort of speak to some of those options. But from what I understood and what I on one end, we could either do like a completely community-driven approach and have the community sort of compile the data and go through the data and then make sense of it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we could have somebody that is a completely professionalized agency or organization that does these sorts of assessments and analyses regularly, take on the responsibility of doing the assessment for the city, but that's going to cost more money. So I would love to find a way forward that absolutely involves the community, engages the community, but someone who has enough professional experience facilitating group conversations on sensitive issues, such as policing, and also has the ability to collect data in a confidential manner. So I think part of the conversation last time was we'd want to have part of the data acquisition interviews, so qualitative interviews with people both in the police department and in the community. And I think that you really do need somebody who is trained in having those conversations and who can be trusted with a level of confidentiality and non-disclosure so that people feel that they can have an honest conversation. And then we could have somebody, that same facilitator compile all the data and make sense of it so that the community then can review it and we can go from there. I think, I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but when we filed the order, one of the big things that we wanted to stress is that we can't manage what we don't measure. So in order to do a better job for the citizens of Holyoke, I think we need to understand what is our police department doing well today, where are we excelling, where are we sort of doing, the basics, and then where do we need improvement. I think that for myself, again, I would really like to know if the structure of the department is helping us to use funds efficiently. I would also like to know whether we are spending money on the programming and training that we need to address the issues in our community. And at this point in time, I just don't feel like we have information in order to move forward and to assure the citizens of Holyoke that we're getting the best return on investment when we're spending close to 10% of our budget on policing in the city of Holyoke. So I think that's the overview, and of course, if the co-sponsors want to add anything, I'd be interested in hearing from them as well. And I do want to just note, Chief Pratt, welcome, and thank you for being here and picking up the baton where Chief Ebo left off. He seemed very open to this process, and I hope you are as well.
Councilor Hernandez. Councilor Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the only thing that I want to add is that I want to ensure that during this process, and whichever way this city and this body decides to move forward with this, that the committee of our citizens that is going to be part of this process, that is involved entirely, and that they have the tools that they need to successfully engage with everything that we're doing. I think that's a really key component to have our community fully engaged in whatever process we put in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, Chief?
Okay, so on this order, as I read it, and certainly I'm aware of it, I look at it in two parts as I read it. One thing I see that to look at the second half of it, the assessment of the Holyoke Police Department's policies, practices, and structure. As we're all aware, the new police reform bill is sort of thrusting that upon us anyway. So that went into, excuse me, that went into effect in December 31st of 20, and we all had to comply by July 1st of this year. I can report here today, we are 100% in compliance with what needed to be done to this point. The law is still unfolding in front of us. The Post Commission is now established, and they're providing new guidance almost daily. New stuff is coming. I'm sure I'll need cheaters by the time it's over. But that being said, I feel as though, quite frankly, to pay for an independent assessment of what is being done almost for free by the state seems a little not really fiscally prudent. Let's get it done first, and then potentially, if we're not in compliance or things aren't proper, then I would welcome it. The first part, as far as the neutral fact-based data and statistics, since I've started working with the mayor, I'm sure he can attest to the fact that he's asked me for many reports on different data, and I've provided what I can. Some of it were limited in the sense of what we can produce quickly for the mayor. He understands that it's not just a push of a button and he gets all the stats. Some of it has to be literally dug out of the reports, and it takes time and effort, but we have been able to give him what he's asked for. So I feel like we're headed in the right direction as far as providing that. Part of one of the things I would say as well is, as I'm sure you're aware, the mayor started his public relations committee. And from that already, in just 2 meetings, we did get great feedback. I have as well. One of the big things was more information out to the public. Before I got that, I had already started, literally in my first week, I've assembled what I'm calling my social media team to get more information out to the public. I feel that when we talked about the police department's failure to possibly get more information out there, one of the things I think about is that, there's a segment of our population that watches the news, and that's where they get their information. But there is a huge segment of our population that gets everything right here. And we don't do a good enough job of getting our message out there and getting the information to the people. So we are looking at that very strongly. And trust me when I tell you, people that are much better at it than me. The mayor and I have that in common. We're not the best with the social media, but that doesn't mean I don't see the importance of it. So with that came from the committee as well. And it was, I love this committee in the sense that there's the public and the police there together, hashing out problems and getting that information back to me to get out there so we can better serve the public. In just 2 meetings, they've had a few things come to us, and some of it is, again, it's information. One of the big areas was CIT training for our officers. We are heavily involved in that, but due to retirements and COVID, there's been a little delay in us getting that training. I can report here tonight that we increased our training budget for CIT training to get us back. Basically what happens there is you get new officers in. Unfortunately, at least right now, they don't get that training in the academy. That might be something that comes down the road, which would make our life a lot easier. But we have to wait for them to come back to us, and then we send them off for the 40-hour training for CIT. We have money in a grant for that, and we got an increase in that this year because we know that's one of the deficiencies, and that's one of the things the committee also brought up and we were able to report back on. So I feel like there's a good exchange going back and forth there, and to me, that is the, for better term, that is the basis of community policing. It's the public and the police working together to solve those problems so that we can better serve the public. I think that that's what we want to do at the police department. We want to serve better. So I think, in just my opinion, and we'll do whatever, I feel like we're a little ahead of ourselves because the police reform bill is providing us that change in policies. Let's get those in place and then see how the engine's running. It's almost like you want to build that engine and see if it works in the car before you go out and see if the car works. So that's where we're at. That's where I see it. And I think as a new chief, I think give me a chance. If you want information, I'm an open book. The mayor will tell you. He asked, I gave it to him. If he's not giving it to you, well then bring it up with him. But I'd be more than happy to anyone who reaches out to me to provide what we can provide. I just caution you that in your request, try to be specific of what you're looking for, because when you give us these broad generalizations of, I want all the data for the last 10 years, it takes time for us to get that. We don't have a push of a button type of thing. We did in the past, and I'll do it again next year, and we can all look at it together. We did want an analyst for the department. I think that would be great, because then when you want those statistics and stuff, that's a person that's devoted to that job to get you that information quicker than probably we can do it. And they're also great at, if we have a problem, you can pose that problem to the analyst and they can get you that statistics you're looking for to say what's the issue here and where can we better use the resources. I'm about working smarter, not harder. The mayor knows. A good example is traffic. We've talked about that. We wish we had more resources to have a full traffic bureau, but we don't. But we do have a plan, and we are trying to, through the use of technology, figure out the best times to do the traffic that we do have with the grants and the extra bodies we might pull. So I think that's about it. And if we were still going to do the independent assessment, I would hope that we would look at, go out. I don't know if it goes out to bid. I don't know how you figure out who's going to do it, but let's vet a few and figure out which is the best one for what you're looking for, so that we can give you the information that you need. But I think you'll find that if you give me a shot, you'll get exactly what you need.
I'm going to recognize Councilor Anderson Burgos in 1 second. I just want to say what the chief has said is absolutely correct. I have, since I've been there, when he was still a captain, I was getting information from him. One of my goals has been to have more and more information out there in the public so that the public knows what's going on. If you notice the newspapers, there's more and more activity that is being reported in the police department. Unfortunately, some of the activity is not the best things we have, but we can see what's happening and how they're dealing with it. So I want the public to know. And I will say one last thing. I've been told this twice, so I got to think this. And I've been told this about another city as well. Some cities prefer not to have that information out. I have asked for good or bad that the information be put out there, and the chief has not resisted in any way, manner, or form in terms of providing me with that information. And I know JR, who is on the Community Police Relations Committee, is here, and he can tell you that every time I provide a different report, right, JR? And that comes from the chief and his staff. So, Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Thank you, Chairman Murphy. Thank you for your service, Chief Pratt. I guess here we are, right? So this is all happening for a reason. And my question is, the police reform seems like this addresses all across, right? It's a bigger scale, Holyoke specific. So my question is, the police reform versus, or in comparison to, what we're trying to see happen, which is the independent assessment. What are the differences? And how is the police reform going to impact a city like Holyoke in comparison to an independent assessment that will impact our community? My interest is the community, the people that live in the city. That is my interest. So if it's going to serve this community, I feel that, I know that you have your observation, how you feel about how you run your department, and I thank you for that. But again, my interest is the people of this community, first and foremost. So if the independent assessment will be a positive impact, then I feel that that should be pushed forward, and not some cookie cutter kind of police reform that was created to address. So I think an independent assessment is needed.
I'm going to I have to rebut that. So I will say, trying to indicate that we're not trying to provide information. We are trying to provide information. I'm trying to go to the public, and I'm not trying to create a cookie cutter. So I want to make that clear.
No.
All right? No.
You didn't push the police reform, Chairperson. I'm not
No.
saying that at all. I'm saying that I feel, and I have every right to, that an independent assessment should be brought forth. I feel that in my heart. Born and raised in the city, I feel that that would be the best interest for this community. I mean, we can allow other people to speak on the matter, but I'm not saying you're shutting any information out or anything like that. Please don't take that the wrong way.
Okay. So I know Professor Hendricks is here, so if it's okay, I would like to invite her to speak.
Suspend the necessary.
I know J.R. Richards also has indicated, Rivera has indicated some public comments that I will try to incorporate into that if it's okay. And I know there's one or two other people that would like to speak, so entertain a motion that we allow the public to speak.
Motion made, second to allow the public to speak.
All in favor?
Aye.
Professor Hendricks, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy. Thank you, councilors. Pleasure to meet you, Chief Pratt. It's been very engaging listening to this conversation, and I think the comments that were just made speak to the challenge of meeting the needs of both this community and then addressing the statewide reforms. So I would say a few things about that. I appreciate that the chief is really looking towards using data to do problem solving and working with bringing in members of the community through the new commission. The state, reform efforts really focus on a broad range of policy changes. One of those was sort of rewriting the use of force policy and including a whole host of some restrictions on police use of force. Public disclosure of police misconduct records. There is language about an affirmative right to bias-free policing in the reform package. And it also led to the creation of new commissions that will obviously certify police officers. That's the post commission that the chief is referring to. On the other hand, I would say that the distinction between what's happening at the state level and what is sort of germane to the Holyoke community is that folks in the community may not be aware or be able to access a lot of information when it comes to some of those changes. So while there will be, rules around public disclosure of police misconduct records, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that residents of Holyoke will have immediate access to information about what kinds of policing is happening in our community. So I'll be a little more specific. I think more information to the news and to the public is critical, but there are many different flavors and ways that information can be packaged. So it sounds a lot like what you've been describing are more disaggregated specific incidents of programs or criminal activity. I think the larger question is, where can the community gain access to aggregate data? And I understand, the chief is, describing that it can be really difficult to both collect, compile, analyze, and then report on this kind of aggregate level data. But that's, I think, what is really needed if we're going to have more accountability and greater openness and transparency, and answer questions like, how do the tenants feel in those buildings that you were discussing in a previous order? Then there needs to be a mechanism for gathering kind of aggregate data on police activities, on public opinion about the police, and not just specific individual instances. So, for example, a place that the community could go to see how many uses of force were there in a year. What are the number of traffic stops? What is the racial breakdown of those enforcement actions? That is sort of the fundamentals of democratic policing. So those are just some reflections. I think that it sounds like people are on the same page in terms of wanting to gather more regular information and to look at it, not just in a specific instance, but across, the city in aggregate, because that's what helps us, respond to the unique public safety needs of the city.
Thank you, Professor. Let me also say, Professor Hendricks did an analysis of East Hampton, which I have been able to read, and I was very impressed with it. And, I think it was a community outreach, and and we have had a few conversations since that meeting, and I know her availability was pretty limited. I was asking her if she might be able to do something smaller, and her availability was still limited. It is my intention at some point to reach out to her again to see what her availability is and to talk about what we might do. I'm sorry, I knew I would tell you that, but you knew it was coming anyway. But I want to say a few things before I let JR. Do you have your comments, JR? I'm going to let you read them. Yeah, I'll let you go to the microphone in 1 minute. So a couple of things that I want to emphasize, and one of the things that I'm trying to do with the Community Police Relations Board is sharing all that information. So at our last meeting, we shared arrest record by race, by ethnicity, by gender. We have shared reports on our activity out of the opioid task force and the behavioral health network and the results of those in terms of getting people into rehab and other things. And the fact that I believe in the May report there was 0 arrest. And we are, and I know I provided, JR, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we provided the last year's record of calls, arrests, crimes, all those kind of things. So we're trying to provide that information and not trying to filter it so it looks better one way or the other. We're just trying to provide the information and comparisons. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do with the Community Relations Board. I haven't had it out in the public, but our next meeting is going to be, the public will be able to come and offer comments, which is going to be next Wednesday. It was going to be today, but since I ended up with this, we cancel it. And that goes from 4 to 5:30 on every second Wednesday. Ordinarily, we had to skip one, but and the goal there is we'll listen and then let that community, and we've had a good interaction, and JR can speak to his thoughts on it. And I've tried to get people from all different opinions and all different age brackets and all different neighborhoods as much as I could to be part of that process and just to share information. And so I think we're moving in the right direction as far as sharing information. And I do appreciate, sometimes he's a little slower than I wish. I don't mean slower in terms of mental focus. I mean slower in terms of giving me the report I want. But, he has given me every single report I've asked for. I've got a lot of reports that I've had to look at and kind of see, all right, why is this? And he knows I question what's going on, why this, why that. And I will continue to do that for the next 10 weeks. And yeah, Chief?
I would just like to say that if I am slow with the report, it's for accuracy. I want to make sure that what I'm giving you is exactly what you want, because one thing I learned in school, that I want to do the report twice.
No, and I was just jesting about the slowness. Please don't take that wrong. JR, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you come to the microphone.
Professor Hendricks does have her hand up again.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay. Professor, is it okay if I hear JR's comments?
Absolutely.
Okay. JR, just give us your name and your address. I know it, but no.
You're gonna turn the
Got it
button.
just on the top there.
Test,
Yep,
test, test.
yep.
All right, perfect. All right, good evening, Council. My name is John J.R. Rivera, and I reside at 2 Laurel Street in Holyoke. As a member of the newly formed Community Police Relations Board, I've come to the conclusion that we necessitate an independent investigation of the Holyoke Police Department structure, policies, and practice in an effort to obtain neutral, fact-based data and statistics. I'd also express that my colleagues, those that past and present CPRBs, neighbors, and those impacted by the most by said structures, such as houseless, BIPOC, drug users, and those below the federal poverty level, are in agreement or at the very least see as to why such an assessment would be called for. Here are some of the statistics that came out of the recent CPRB meetings. A good lot of our police officers, approximately 60%, have gone through the 40-hour crisis intervention training, the CIT that Chief mentioned. Chief, Chief, hope I get those labels right. The department has shown willingness to increase, which is a wonderful thing, though perceives 100% to be a bit unachievable. But this is unaware, is and are unaware as to how they'll complete this goal. But nonetheless, it is a goal in everybody's mind. And another statistic is that Holyoke has no homeless shelters for single entities. Holyoke does have shelters for family entities, but none for single entities. There's also a concern that has been brought up in the CPRB meeting, which is how intransparent the Holyoke Police Department is, and how we can increase the transparency in the Holyoke Police Department, as well as not only increasing the transparency, but also making sure that the community members are in knowledge of what's going on with whatever is going on. And another one is a majority of those at the Community Police Relations Board have some type of relationship with the police, whether it's familial, friendship, whatever it may be. So one has to consider that this comes with some sort of bias, whether any at all. I hope that you all show willingness to do what the committee was here born to do. The public is concerned, and that is enough to show willingness to assess what's going on in our police department from an independent and unbiased entities. I appreciate everybody's time here and willingness to open up for public comment. Thank you guys for your time, and have a great night.
Thank you, Jer. Professor Hendricks?
Just a quick follow-up about the data, and I guess I would just pose to this body, where does that information live? So I think it's wonderful that there is a greater exchange of information to the mayor and to the Community Relations Board. But where does that information live? Is there a place on the website? How can regular citizens who may not have access to those meetings, who maybe don't tune in to these sessions, where can they find that? And so I think that's sort of an outstanding question.
We are.
What are we in? Yeah.
We
Go
are.
ahead.
We are putting or looking to put our annual report and some monthly statistics as well on both the police website and the city's website for public access. And Chief, I know you had a reply to that.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. as we talked about.
Do you, and I know we've been working on getting it up on the website. Have we been able to finish that, or are we close?
We aren't, only because there is, an issue of as you increase your social media presence, there's a need to back everything up you do there, and there is a company that does that for us.
Okay.
And we are getting that in place. We certainly want to walk before we run. We will be, anything we put out is now subject to public information, even if we take it down, things like that. So we had that meeting last week with the company, and that was finalized this week. So once we get that behind us, within a week or so, we should be able to put that up.
So hopefully the first week in September or thereabouts, we should have the report for the last fiscal year's statistics. And one other thing I've tried to do, again, to get more information out, is to have press events where we deal with specific concerns. Like we were at Race Street and talking about the behavioral health network system and the opioid crisis intervention team. So we are trying to get more and more information, and I know when I spoken to you, Professor, on several occasions, that was one of the things, and I certainly put it on part of my agenda when I took this office. So we are trying to get out as much and make it easily accessible. It wouldn't be easily accessible for me, but easily accessible for the public that is technologically advanced. And we are trying to make sure it's city website and the police website so that it is available. And let me also say right now, if there is ever a concern for any issue that someone does not feel comfortable going anywhere else, it will be come to me. It'll be confidential. I'll try to deal with it in a confidential manner. And I've had some people that have come to me on other things, and that's part of the job I'm trying to do. So, Professor, anything else on that?
I would just encourage, the council to look at the mission and the vision of the police department and think about how we as a city can measure, what it means. Like, are we meeting those goals? And in a lot of settings and industries, there is a requirement to assess and regularly examine policies and practices. And I think law enforcement is really no different than those agencies, healthcare, education, and there is a real need to get baseline information and then invite the community to be part of that decision-making process. And they can only be a part of it if they have information and they're invited in, and maybe we don't wait for them to call us, but we proactively reach out, and it sounds like that is happening, so that's really encouraging, and I just would applaud additional efforts in that direction.
Thank you, Professor. Jeffrey, do we have any public comment?
I want to speak again.
Okay. Councilor Lisi and then Councilor Hernandez, then we'll go back to public comment.
Okay, thank you. So I want to just chime in here and say, when I think about structure, policies, and practices, there's an opportunity here to collect data and understand each of these three different things. And the state level police reform, to the point that I think Councilor Anderson Burgos was making earlier, is a broad overarching policy. So, if our department is coming into compliance with those policies, then maybe in some ways we could put a check next to policies. But when we're talking about structure is about how are we organized as a department so that we're creating efficiency, so that we're spending our money on the things that we need and making sure that when we do spend money that there is not a lot of waste. And then when it comes to practices, practices is how are those policies implemented. So I think there's a lot of information that needs to be learned here, and I feel that when I hear, I mean, even in the name of the board that you created, Acting Mayor Murphy, it's the Police Community Relations Board, and we absolutely need to develop a police community relations campaign. But that campaign of police community relations need to be absolutely predicated upon transparent and accessible data. So when I hear Professor Hendricks talking about, where's the data and how is it accessible, it's not, generating department reports and then disseminating that on social media. It's that there should be something to the effect of a publicly searchable database that anyone in the public can go and generate their own reports. I do think that a police community relations campaign is important, but it's really important that that relationship is based on truth. And so I think if the community wants to feel that that relationship is based on truth, they need access to that data. We need to have information, and I think it really puts the department in a really empowered position to say, we're an open book, here it all is, and we are here to work alongside you. And the police reform policies is one segment. And again, the structure is about how are we organized and is it efficient? And on the other side, the practices is how are those policies implemented? And I mean, the example that I would put there is we do 40% of crisis intervention training is what I just heard in terms of the stats that came out of the recent meeting.
No, 60%.
Oh, I'm sorry, 60%. So 60% of our officers are getting crisis intervention training. Once they receive that training, what does it look like in the field, right? Are they actually implementing their training in the way that it was designed? Or are there shortcomings because of, budget issues? Or, are we modifying it in some way? I think there's a number of things like that. So we may have the policy in place. We may, do crisis intervention training and other trainings and other sort of protocols, but what does it look like? Are we actually implementing them in the way that they're designed? Are we seeing a return in terms of effectiveness in the way that we're doing things? So I really do think that the assessment puts the entire community, along with the police department, in a really empowered position to say, this is how we're doing things, and this is what we're doing well, and if there's things that we need to modify, we shouldn't be afraid of that. That should be a really, positive step that we could do an analysis and say, this is how we're going to move forward and, correct any deficiencies that we might have. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Hernandez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add that what I've, been able to absorb from this whole discussion is that, and I hear what our chief is telling us, that, he's a new chief, to give him a shot, and I think that it's almost like we're looking at this independent study almost like in a negative way, and it should be all the contrary from that. I see it as an opportunity to tailor what our community is looking for, what it needs, versus, we have all these other, components that, yes, there's a police reform that's happening throughout, but with this independent study, it would tailor and provide our citizens and people that otherwise wouldn't be able to access this information to get transparent, accountable information from our police department, from our city. And because we need to ask ourselves, the questions that we're asking, the information, and I want to commend you, Acting Mayor Murphy and Chairman, that you've been in communication and you're being as transparent as possible and extracting all this information from the police department. But the questions that we're asking, is that what our citizens want to hear? Is that what they want to learn? So those are the important questions, and I think that through the independent study, we're going to be able to deliver that to them. And that's what's so important about this to go through. Thank you.
Do you have someone else?
Yeah, we have a couple people with their hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, Jeffrey, if you don't mind, let me let the chief answer, and then we'll open up to the public. And Jeffrey, when we get to that, I'm going to ask you to just name the people and ask them to talk so that we can go from there.
Sure.
You'll be okay? Chief?
I'm certainly listening, and I want to just address certain things when I hear it, and I feel that it's needs to be addressed. As far as the crisis intervention training, yes, that number's at it's actually 65, but at one time we were at 80. I think it's important to understand, and this was, I know, relayed to the Community Relations Board, and I want to relay it to everyone, that we are constantly striving for that 100%, but you have to understand that as people retire and we bring new people in, there is a time gap. So for lack of a better way of putting it, you're constantly chasing that tail of 100%. I would like to see it up around 80 to 85%, because I believe that would take into account the retirements and keep us maybe not 100%, but about as close to 100% as we can get. I think that it's important that everyone understands that not only do we have all our officers trained, or not all of them, but striving for that, we also have a completely separate officer working with a BHN counselor on the grant. Something I know that's huge all over the country now. We've been doing it, I think, for 3 years. So we're ahead of the curve on a lot of this. I think I agree. We should have done a better job of getting that message out. So I just want everyone to know that we believe in that program. We believe in the CIT training. There is certainly no hesitation on our part to do the training. It's about getting it in time. COVID certainly put a little dent in it as well, because they weren't offering the training. So it makes it hard to train when you don't have the classes. Yes, so that's just, to clear that up right out of the gate. I think that one thing I'm trying to stress is a lot of this transparency and data, and we want to put it out there. We want to do it. What I think is being lost is that we don't have the capability to just pump out data like it's like, we're more than happy to do it, but I'm guarantee you there's going to be a cost, and we'll be back here in front of the council to get us the proper software, get us an analyst, which we've asked for several years, which gets cut out of the budget every year. So I want to be very clear that the department is not looking at this as, that we don't think it's positive. We'll take all the help we can get, but I also don't want to tie up officers pulling crime data. I think anyone that has ever lived in Holyoke knows what goes on here. I don't think they need a statistical sheet to tell them that. And I think most people in the public would rather see their officers out on the street protecting them than sitting behind a computer pulling crime stats. So I would like to see some movement towards who would do that. And even if we go to an independent outside agency, well, they're certainly going to be knocking on our door for those statistics. And I'm going to have to tie up people now giving them the stats they want, as well as the mayor, as well as the city council. My point is, we're more than willing to give you what we got, but we can't give you what we don't have. So just keep that in mind as you move down this road. We'll cooperate however we have to, but I want to caution you on that this stuff doesn't just push a button and it pops out and we can hand you the stats. It doesn't work that way. We don't have that level of computer software. I wish we did, and I wish I had a dedicated person that I could give all of these to, and I would much prefer that as opposed to a one-time independent review, and giving us ideas of what we can do better. I think we can do that on our own, but I'm not opposed to it. I just want to be clear, and I don't think our department is either.
You all set? Okay, Jeffrey, can you just call out the first person on public comment?
Sure. Did you want to clarify rules, if any, for public comment?
Why don't we keep it to 2 minutes to start with, and then if we have follow-up, we'll ask questions.
All right, and name and address, I presume.
Yeah, name and address, yep.
All right, first we have Spencer Fox Peterson, and he's just transitioning over to panelist.
Spencer, when you're ready, go ahead.
Good evening. Sorry, I got a bad shadow. I'm Spencer Peterson. I live at 51 Portland Street. Can everybody hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I have to support what most people have said in favor of transparency when it comes to our police force. I would just be repeating a lot and adding more detail, so I'm just going to keep it short, and I'm going to point out something that is a bigger picture issue of why we need it, why we need this information, and we need to really consider how we police going forward, if police will even exist, and we'll just have more public safety. That's a debate for later, but we have an actual national security question. These are just data that I have been burned in my brain since I've learned them, and this can be corroborated by court records, so please fact check it. There's been something like 600 charges on the January 6th riots at the Capitol where there was an attempted coup d'etat. It's not a matter of opinion. There's thousands of hours of video of what happened. We can figure out how it happened, but 20% of the 600 charged, keep in mind that's 600 out of probably 10,000 plus people, were law enforcement or military. We need to know everything. It's a matter of national security. So, and that's just the cold hard truth. Nobody wants to hear it, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Spencer.
All right, next we have Joanna May Booty.
Joanna, go ahead. You're on mute right now.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm thankful for your time tonight and for this discussion overall. It's great to hear that the chief is saying that he welcomes questions and openness with the public, along with the acting mayor and some of the council. I agree with the community members and the rest that have spoke tonight, along with Professor Hendrick's remarks wholeheartedly, that an independent review is necessary in Holyoke. I would like to point out that often, and especially recently, I view information to the public on social media from Holyoke Police Department to be very upsetting and unethical. It is not what I would consider information or data to be, and it is not helpful to the public most often. People at very low points in their life that need assistance, rather than have their face be posted on social media, are put up and information is relayed without any actual charges or due process being made. This type of communication does not feel like a positive way to engage with the community at all. In fact, it is very upsetting. A social media team was mentioned tonight by the chief, and this could be a passing comment, but social media posting is not a way to gather data and has been discussed a lot tonight. It sounds as if you think that you need to put out news, but instead you should be keeping good records and good metrics that can easily be relayed to the public from the department. Social media is not that. As a community member, I would prefer you to be a leader in collecting and reporting transparent data, responding to requests with information regarding how your time is spent, and etc. It is not serving the community to be posting arrest records and things like of that information on social media, especially the amount of posting as well. This does not uplift your community in any way. Again, I would recommend that your department undergo an independent investigation based on this meeting, as well as the information I have seen in just the past year coming out from this department. I would encourage the current police department to embrace the idea of transparency overall and allow the community members to feel safe working with them to understand the needs in Holyoke related to this department and the community. I urge you to please consider allowing the outside assessment. Again, your community needs this. This could be something that brings the community closer together, and it will give you the information you need to continue to move forward in a very positive direction. Please consider being leaders for surrounding communities and embracing this idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joanna.
Terry?
Councilor Tallman?
Could you get her full name again and address? I didn't get the address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Joanna, can you give me your address?
Sure, it's Joanna Maybuti, and I'm a resident of Montague, Massachusetts, 10 Federal Street.
She's not okay.
Thanks, Peter.
You got it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Bridget Kearney.
Bridget, whenever you're ready, okay?
She's on mute.
Hi, I'm Bridget Kearney. I live at 51 Portland Street in Holyoke. I just wanted to jump in kind of spontaneously to offer support to this measure and kind of echo what all of the council members have said. And I can definitely appreciate what the chief mentioned. It's definitely incredibly difficult to gather all of this data. But I'm a social worker in a healthcare field. And like I think Councilmember Lisi said, quality control is something that happens in a lot of different fields. And certainly like in my field, there is a dedicated person to gather this data. Like I go through tons of training every single year, but whether or not I implement that is, not for sure, right? So it's up to the quality control folks in my organization to make sure I'm doing that. And I think it would keep the community safer, and I think it would keep the officers safer as well. And I just don't see really any drawbacks. If it's a budget issue, then I'm definitely going to attend more meetings and make sure that we, get the budget for whatever is needed to make this happen, because I think it's so critical and frankly kind of outrageous that in this country it's not already done. So that's it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bridget. Anyone else, Jeffrey?
There are no other hands up at the moment. I would just remind people, if you go over your screen, you'll either see a raised hand or if you click participants, a raised hand option should show up next to your name. All right, there are no other hands raised at the moment.
Okay, Councilor McGivern? Any thoughts?
None.
You're all set?
Yep.
Okay, any other councilors here? All set?
The one thing, if I may.
Councilor Lisi?
The one thing that I might offer is, if there could be a way to move forward incrementally. So we if there's a concern that we might not have the budget to do like the full facilitated community process in terms of the practices and how we're implementing our policies. There could be an opportunity to work on one segment at a time. So could we have an analysis done of our structure to understand whether or not there's efficiencies there, and that the way that the department is structured is meeting the sort of issues and concerns that we have in the community. Just in terms of I'm going to give this example. I know it's not a really great example, but it's just what I have to work with at the moment. So, the uptick in sort of gun violence that we saw, right? So is the way that our department's structured and the way that we're allocating resources within that structure, is it actually helping to address an issue such as gun violence? That's a question that I think we can have answered by an independent analysis of the structure. And then from there, if you wanted to separate it out into, structure is one analysis and the practice is another analysis, I think that is another way of moving forward. But I do think that, again, information is power. So why not put the city and our residents and our officers in a position where we understand what's happening, and that there is just a sense of efficiency and effectiveness to the way that we're doing things.
Okay. Chief?
Yeah, I probably should have addressed it earlier and spoke about the structure of the police department. Just to let you know, I've been a police officer here for 28, almost 29 years. Come up through the ranks, and I've held just about every position in that police department that there is, topping it off here with Chief. And what I would say is that the structure is something I'm very capable of answering any questions about. I probably am the most capable person to answer any of those questions. I'd be more than happy to address what we do when it comes to gun violence or any other crime that comes up, and how we use the structure that we have in place. We spoke of structure in the budget hearings, trying to increase our span of control, or decrease our span of control, I should say, by adding a fourth captain. That didn't fly either. So we structure the department, and what I would say, like every probably agency there is, the motto is you do more with less. I just happened to, when I was cleaning out my old desk, I found an old roster from 2001 that had 103 patrolmen assigned to it. We're down to 90. And most times we're less than that. So we have to adjust and move people and do what we do. I am a firm, strong believer in task forces. I have been part of task forces my entire career. That is how we bring more resources here. What I can tell you is that our relationships with all our federal and state partners are excellent, as well as the DA's office. And when, for lack of a better word, when we need help, we ask and we get it. And that's how we have supplemented what's happened over the last 20 years with the loss of personnel. We get a lot of bang for our buck in those task forces, and they also provide us with equipment and resources and funding. I would love to have a discussion with anyone about the structure of the Holyoke Police Department who feels they might have some tips for me. I'm an open, honest guy. I'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. So feel free, fire away.
So if I can, I'll just offer a few comments, and then I'll let you make a motion, Councilor McGivern. So a few things I want to emphasize. Professor Hendricks and I, we've had a few conversations, and the idea of potentially doing parts of this at a time has come up, both from a funding structure, but also from an idea of starting to put the pieces together. I know Councilor McGivern has also read Professor Hendricks' report from East Hampton, and something like that certainly is something I would not have a major concern with in terms of what happens. I do think as Professor Hendricks gets back to teaching at HCC, maybe her schedule eases up a little bit, and she and I will have a meeting to discuss further what can go on. We are making every effort to provide easy access to the public to as much information as we can get. I have tried to hold nothing back from the public, whether it was good or bad, and I'll continue to do that. And the chief has been, he hasn't ever said to me, I wish you wouldn't do that. Sometimes he said to me, I wish you'd give me a little longer, but I don't oppose giving that information out. We are sharing the good and the bad. I mean, we've had some crime tick in the last couple of days that has brought some concerns in the public, and we're not hiding that. We're trying to deal with it. We're trying to find out how we handle it and report that publicly. So I think we have tried to make it a much more open process. I will continue for the next 10 weeks to try to do that, and I'll work with the chief to make sure. I'll work with the Community Police Relations Board. Again, those meetings will be public, starting with the next one. I want public input. I don't want the public to dominate the meeting, because I want that committee to be able to hear what the public says and then try to figure out, all right, where do we go? Where do we make suggestions to the chief in terms of making improvements in the department, but also hear the concerns of the public. So, and so I want to finish on that note, and Councilman McGivern, I'll let you make a motion.
Am I allowed to make a couple comments
No,
first,
whoa,
Mr.
I
Chairman?
didn't know you wanted to. Okay, Councilman McGivern. Sorry about that, Joe.
No, it's not your fault. I've been silent, but listening very intently. Just a few comments. The intent of the order and things I've heard this evening go hand in hand to a degree, but this order is incredibly broad, and I'm concerned about that. Police department structures, policies, and practices. I'm all in favor of the data that Chief Pratt has talked about, Mayor Murphy has talked about, the transparency of being open to what the data will reveal of the Holyoke Police Department. The interpretation of the data is to the beholder, is subject to interpretation, and we know how that can go. What I don't, and what I'm concerned about, and what I don't want to promote is, I'm a city councilor. I'm not the mayor. Don't want to be the mayor. But I do want to be a good city councilor. And to know the structure and understand the structure is part of being a councilor of any department, especially a major department in the city of Holyoke. The financing, the budgeting of that department is a big part of our responsibility. Therefore, we need to know and use data. In order to vote on this request, we need to fill in the blanks of who's going to perform, if someone is going to perform the independent assessment, who's going to choose who's going to perform the independent assessment, and what does it cost, okay? We have a charter that links us to state government, a charter that allows us to have local government. We must abide by the charter or look to change the charter. The charter is very simple here. The mayor of the city of Holyoke appoints the chief of police. The chief of police governs the Holyoke Police Department. Our role is to support that financially, cost effectively, and morally. And yes, we need to know what's going on, and the more data we can see, the better we can make our judgments. So independent, I'm not bought into that yet, because I'm hearing a lot of good things about data is being more transparent, data is being more available, and it's the data, as Chief Pratt said so correctly, is only what can be produced at their level, and right now they don't have in their budget the money to pay someone to do the data that I think everybody's reaching out to. So I'm in favor of bringing this further, but I'm very much in favor of supporting the Holyoke Police Department as the charter, dictates the way we should support the police department, and to keep to keep in mind the budget and the paying for and looking for more transparency. The transparency of any department within the city of Holyoke lies with the mayor and lies with the department head and the support from other elected officials in whichever way we want to analyze it, whichever way. And I understand Professor Hendricks makes a great point, and I think some of our counselors have made the same point, is we need a database that's accessible to the public, and that the public can start to understand what they're seeing and hearing in the news. I'm still with you, Chief Pratt, but also on social media, and I know I have 2 daughters that overlook me on my social media, and they keep tabs on Dad there. So what I'm trying to say is the last and only thing, the concern I have is we do not want the Holyoke City Council to think we manage the police department in any way. We don't. It's not our job. It never should be, never was, and yet I've seen that happen in these chambers, and not just with the police department. We need to let the managers manage the department. We need to support the department and understand what's going on in the department so we can better support it and better advocate change, but we do not and should not cross the line into management.
Okay, Councilor Lisi.
Thank you. So I'm just brainstorming here. What came to mind was when I filed the order for the creation of a capital stabilization fund. Councilor Murphy, you did a lot of work with our bond counsel to understand what were the different ways that we could do that. You know, was it just the one-time transfer? You found out what the options were. So I wonder if there's an ability to work with Professor Hendricks on sketching out bid specs for a facilitator or independent assessment, and then just getting a sense of how much it would cost and bringing that information back to our next discussion, and figuring out, I guess, the range of costs, and just figuring out the scope of work that, you know, based on the conversation here and based on the expertise that Professor Hendricks brings to the table, if we could actually start to get, you know, some more concrete information about what the bid specs would look like, what the scope of the assessment would be, and what the cost would be based on that scope.
Yeah, if I can, I'll just answer. Professor Hendricks and I have had a couple of conversations, and you know, I believe she had indicated to me somewhere in the middle of September she would be more available to have those kind of conversations. And Professor, if I'm wrong on the date, forgive me, but that is certainly something I will do. I have a lot of respect for Professor Hendricks. She always complained when I didn't have her books at the HCC, but I still have respect for her. One. So I will be doing that, and as long as Professor Hendricks is willing, I mean, I think we will discuss the kind of things that she would suggest. We will discuss costs. We will discuss how we can implement them. Can we implement some of them and have a more immediate effect, and some are long term. So that's the commitment I've made. I've made that commitment from the beginning, not from an aspect of criticism, but from an aspect of just trying to make sure we're doing the best we can. And if there are assets that we don't have, that we should have, that's fine. If there are things that we need better training or whatever, then we would try to research those as well. I will end with this, and then I'll entertain a motion for you, Councilor McGivern. But, you know, again, the goal and the public, I welcome your comments. The Community Police Relations Board will welcome your comments. The only thing I ask all the way through the process, and we had it tonight, is that we respectfully offer comments, and we're going to have differences of opinion in how something might be done and what the ultimate goal is. But we're all trying to do, in my opinion, we're all trying to do what we think is best for the community, and that includes trying to make sure the community feels comfortable with the police, that the police feel comfortable with the community, and the ultimate goal is that the community is safer and feeling like we can walk in any neighborhood and feel comfortable. So that's the goal. But Councilor McGivern, I'm going to let you now make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In lieu of what we just heard, I don't think this is ready for a final vote by the City Council, so I would make a motion to table it.
Okay, second. Not debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Professor, if just kind of keep in mind that I'll be in touch with you shortly, if that's okay.
That would be great.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks everyone else that was here on that issue. I'll entertain a motion to take up item 6 on the agenda.
Motion made second to take up item number 6.
Okay, item 6, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Introduced by Councilor Hernandez to invite the Chief of Police to discuss the plan that the department has in place in case there is any domestic terrorism in our city, and if there are any changes to the current plan that were prompted since the attack on the Capitol Hill. So, Chief? Now, Councilor Hernandez and then Chief. Councilor Hernandez? Sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And so this order I filed right after the terrorist attack at the Capitol Hill, and thinking of, and from conversations that we had earlier, right, about safety, security, I wanted to know if there was a plan in place if something like that was to happen here in these chambers, if there were to be such a manifestation of an act of terrorism here, how would the Holyoke Police handle it? And if there is a plan already, how would it change considering this took place in Capitol Hill?
So, what I would say about this, and I thought about this as I read the order, a lot of it is just like you said, all the stuff we were talking about earlier, security measures. Obviously, we want to enhance as many of those as we can. We do have I wouldn't call it a written plan, but we do have a plan in place for domestic terrorism, as well as any sort of, let's just call it civil unrest, anything of larger scale that we would need to address. I can start by telling you that myself, personally, I am a member of the executive board of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So I am privy to briefings and being kept up to speed with any potential threat. In preparation of this meeting, I reached out to that agency and just to check, and so everyone knows that there is no imminent threat that we're aware of. If there was, then we would react proactively. What I would say, without getting into too much detail, that we have what we would do is very similar to what I talked about earlier with our partners. We have a group within the Holyoke Police Department that's trained and ready to handle such an event. We would reach out to the state police, who also would assist us, as well as the sheriff's department, and we would be able to force multiply very quickly to prepare for something of that nature. If we thought, even for a second, there might be something like that, we could incrementally put that into place. As far as a out of the blue event, we spoke pretty clearly about that. That would have to be as we respond. And again, we could activate those things as they might take a little longer, but we would respond as we would to any disturbance or any problem. So I think the good news is that we are well tuned in. We're made aware immediately if there was anything ever to come along those lines to the city of Holyoke, and the council in general. So I feel pretty comfortable knowing that. I've been part of that for quite some time. So I'm you know, as I say, these are personal relationships I have with these people. So it's, you know, we are going to be well informed in Holyoke if there's ever an imminent threat or anything even slightly brewing out there. We'd be aware of it. And then we would take the appropriate action prior to any meeting or anything if we thought. Probably stuff that people here would never even see or know happened, but just know that we're on it. I don't know if I can go into too much more detail. Maybe that would be another executive session if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, we don't want to make it too all set, Councilor Hernandez?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. So the task force was the executive joint committee, or I'm sorry, could you name the task force that you're part of on terrorism?
It's the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It's run by the FBI.
So it's a federal level.
It's a federal level, yes. Mm-hmm. And it is comprised of many partners, federal, state, and local. Mm-hmm. And they brief us. We have meetings, and they brief us on the most recent up-to-date events. But as I said, because I have the clearance, if there was something, they would call me right away. It's not something they couldn't tell me, and I'm able to respond. They would do that for any department, whether they're on the task force or not, but because I am and already cleared, I can be given
direct
information that, say, other people might not be able.
And then is it organized regionally? So like when you are meeting, is it a national conversation with these partners, or is it regionally sort of like subdivided so that you're focused on, I don't know, particular threats or risks that might be in this area?
It is regional, and some things expand, and we're made aware of what's going on nationally as well. Some of the meetings include people being, for lack of a better word, zoomed in and giving us information from other parts of the country that might relate to here. It's very informative, and I'm glad to be a partner in that, because I think it's important.
Right, thank you.
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, I just wanted to add thank you very much, Chief Pratt, and taking into consideration, I mean, I feel much better now with this response, but when these events took place, there was a lot of groups that joined from this area, so that's why I thought that, you know, it would have been prudent for us to address this, meaning that they're in such close proximity to Holyoke, and like our counselor said earlier today, Anderson Burgos, we all have different opinions and bring forward different proposals that may or may not be well, you know, perceived by our community. So that's why I filed this, to make sure that we were safe while serving our community. Thank you.
So, I mean, it sounds like we're, without being able to, unless you wanted to eventually come back and hear the specifics of what any plans, but I think looks like we pretty much have a plan out there, working cooperatively with the other regions and the other cities and state and sheriff's office and the FBI. So obviously the key is getting an early advance notice that there's some potential trouble coming down the road is the key to making sure we resolve it. So if it's okay, I would entertain a motion that it's been complied with.
Make a motion that it's been complied with. Thank Councilor Hernandez for bringing it to our attention, and thank Chief Pratt for all he does, especially for participating at such a high level for our protection and for your department, Chief. Motion that's complied with.
Okay, and second, any other comments? All in favor? Aye? Aye?
Aye. Aye.
I do nothing, thank you. The seventh item and Chief, thank you very much. You are dismissed. The seventh item on the agenda is, we did notify Councilor Graney because we had some concerns getting people, and there's a variety of reasons why, and I'll just tell you why. But I'm going to introduce, take it off
the table for discussion.
Item 7 off the table for discussion, introduced by Councilor Howard Graney. Ordered that the Holyoke City Council invite a medical professional from Holyoke Medical Center or Bay State Health to discuss the pros and cons of marijuana usage and its effect on the community. A couple of things, just so you know, and Jeffrey has been reaching out. One, Holyoke Medical Center, because of the pandemic, we've had a little more concern with having to deal with some other medical issues, obviously, and they just didn't feel at this point they could have somebody just come down and deal with this. They're more concerned about taking care of the COVID problems. The people at Bay State, and Jeffrey, you correct me if I'm wrong, they also would like a little more time, not necessarily because of COVID, but they would like a little more time to think about this, to do a little more research so that they could come back. So I didn't, Jeffrey was kind enough to inform Councilor Graney because I didn't want him to come down and not have anything going on. So I will take this up at another meeting. If it's all right with you, Councilman, we could table this.
Make a motion to table.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so I think that
Motion
is our
to adjourn.
motion has been made to adjourn, and I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks all. Take care. Stay safe.